J.D. Vance, a man who had built his career on exposing corruption and standing for justice, sat calmly at the defendant's table. He had faced challenges before, but something about this trial felt different. There was tension in the air, a feeling that this wasn't about justice, it was about something else. At the bench sat Judge Thompson, a man with a reputation for being ruthless. But there was another side to him, one that few dared to speak about, a side that reeked of corruption. And today he was about to make a fatal mistake. From the moment the hearing began, the judge's tone was mocking, his words laced with contempt. "Did Trump send you here to complain, Mr. Vance?" he sneered. Laughter rippled through the room, but J.D. Vance didn't flinch, because what the judge didn't know was that his own secrets were about to be exposed. Stay tuned until the end. I hope you love it. Before we continue, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The gavel slammed against the wood, demanding order. Judge Thompson sat back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He wasn't just here to oversee a case. He was here to make a statement. J.D. Vance, seated at the defense table, met the judge's gaze without a hint of fear. He had seen men like this before. Arrogant, power-hungry, convinced they were untouchable. The prosecution presented their case, but it was clear from the start that this wasn't a fair trial. Every time Vance's attorney spoke, Judge Thompson interrupted. Every objection they raised was denied with a wave of his hand, and then came the insults. "You call yourself a senator, Mr. Vance? I've seen law students argue better than you," the judge scoffed, shaking his head. Laughter echoed through the courtroom. J.D. Vance clenched his jaw but didn't react. He knew better than to fight back now, because while the judge basked in his own arrogance, J.D. had something the judge didn't know about. A file sat on the table in front of him, thick, heavy, filled with secrets. And when the time was right, J.D. Vance was going to turn the tables, and the entire courtroom would never forget what happened next. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his smirk widening. He thought he had J.D. Vance right where he wanted him, cornered, humiliated, powerless. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Mr. Vance?" the judge asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Vance took a slow breath. Then, without a word, he reached for the thick file on the table and flipped it open. "Actually, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm, controlled, "I do." The judge's smirk faltered for the first time. Vance pulled out the first document, holding it up for the courtroom to see. "This is a bank statement," he announced, "one that shows a rather large deposit made to an offshore account. An account linked directly to you, Judge Thompson." The room fell into stunned silence. The reporters in the back scrambled for their pens. Judge Thompson scoffed, but his fingers gripped the bench tighter. "This is nonsense," he snapped. Vance ignored him, pulling out another paper. "And this? A wire transfer from a known political donor, a donor whose case you mysteriously ruled in favor of last year." Gasps spread through the courtroom. Even the prosecution looked uncomfortable. Vance's eyes locked onto the judge. "Care to explain that, Your Honor?" Judge Thompson opened his mouth, but no words came out, because for the first time in his career, he was the one on trial. Judge Thompson's face turned red, his once smug expression replaced with something else. Panic. "This court will not entertain baseless accusations," he barked, gripping his gavel. His voice was louder now, but there was a tremor beneath it. J.D. Vance remained calm, unfazed by the outburst. He lifted another page from the file and held it up. "Then maybe the FBI will," he said smoothly. The entire courtroom gasped. Vance turned to the prosecution, handing over the documents. The lead attorney, a man who had been quiet throughout the trial, scanned the pages. His eyebrows furrowed, and then he stood up. "Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat, "these allegations are serious. I request an immediate recess to review this evidence." The judge slammed his gavel. "Denied." But the murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. People weren't looking at J.D. Vance anymore. They were looking at the judge. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Two men in dark suits walked in. Federal agents. The tension in the room snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Judge Thompson's hands clenched into fists. "This is my courtroom," he roared, his voice cracking. I will not be disrespected. But the lead agent stepped forward, flashing a badge. Judge Thompson, he said firmly, you need to come with us. And in that moment, the man who thought he controlled the law lost all control of his own fate. Judge Thompson's face twisted in fury. He gripped the sides of his bench as if he could hold on to his power through sheer force of will. You can't do this, he spat, his voice rising. This is outrageous. But the lead agent remained unmoved. He pulled a warrant from his jacket and held it up. Judge Thompson, you are under investigation for bribery, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Reporters scrambled to take notes, cameras flashed, and attorneys exchanged stunned looks. Two officers stepped forward. One reached for the judge's wrist, but Thompson yanked his arm away. I am a judge, he bellowed. You don't get to treat me like this. The agent's expression didn't change. No one is above the law. The officers moved again, this time gripping Thompson's arms as they snapped the handcuffs around his wrists. A silence fell over the room, the kind that only comes when justice is finally served. As Judge Thompson was escorted out, J.D. Vance watched him go, his face unreadable. The tables had turned. The man who once sat high above others, passing judgment, was now the one being judged. The moment Judge Thompson was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, headlines flashed across television screens and social media. Corrupt judge arrested in his own courtroom, caught red-handed. Political commentators called it one of the most shocking legal takedowns in years. The footage of the judge's arrest replayed on every major news network. Some couldn't believe it. A man who once held so much power had fallen so fast. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed J.D. Vance, shoving microphones toward him. Senator Vance, any comments on what happened today? One asked. Vance adjusted his tie and simply said, Justice should be blind. No one is above the law. Meanwhile, Donald Trump reacted in classic fashion, posting on Truth Social. They tried to take J.D. down, but look what happened instead. Another corrupt judge exposed. As for Judge Thompson, his career was finished. He faced multiple charges and every case he had ever ruled on was now under review. But for J.D. Vance, this wasn't just a win. It was proof that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, the truth will always catch up with them. This wasn't just a courtroom battle. It was a lesson in power, corruption, and accountability. Judge Thompson thought he was untouchable, that his title, his connections, and his influence would shield him forever. He had spent years looking down on others, passing judgment from his high bench, believing no one could challenge him. But the truth? No one is above the law. J.D. Vance didn't just defend himself that day. He exposed a system built on arrogance and corruption. And in the end, it wasn't Vance who was left humiliated. It was the man who thought he controlled everything. The image of Judge Thompson being led away in handcuffs would be remembered for years. It was proof that no matter how high someone climbs, the fall is always waiting, especially when they build their success on lies and deceit. But here's the real question. How many more Judge Thompsons are out there? How many people hiding behind their titles and positions believe they'll never be caught? And more importantly, who will have the courage to stand up and expose them next? Because in the end, the only real power is the truth.